Imagine finding yourself suddenly unable to speak. The thoughts are right there in your head, but your brain seems to be holding your words hostage. When a stroke damages parts of the left hemisphere that are normally involved in language production, it can result in a condition called aphasia, trouble speaking or understanding language. When this happens, it seems like parts of the right hemisphere of the brain try to compensate for that damage by taking over some of the language function. Unfortunately, it also seems like this might interfere with the full recovery. This has led scientists to develop new treatments that involve magnetic stimulation to the right side of the head using a magnetic coil like the one shown on the right side of the slide. They think that by inhibiting some of that extra activity on the right, it'll force the left hemisphere of the brain to become more and more active and ultimately result in a better recovery. Unfortunately, we don't really understand very well how language is organized in the brain. We don't really know whether that right hemisphere is really compensating for damage. In fact, other studies have shown that as people start to learn a second language, the right hemisphere becomes more and more active. So we decided that we needed to take a step back and try and understand more about how language is organized in the brain before jumping into treatments that we don't really understand very well. To do this, we took some healthy patients, we taught them some brand new words in Spanish that they'd never learned before, and we put them in the MRI to see what would happen in their brain when they said words in English or words in Spanish. As it turns out, and as you can see from the brain on the right, we actually use quite a bit of our right hemisphere when we say words in English. We don't see this in the Spanish words, which would have turned up in blue, but there is quite a bit of overlap in the left hemisphere language regions. Now, it could just be that our participants didn't learn their Spanish words well enough to engage the full language circuitry. So to look further at it, we used that magnetic stimulation technique on both the right and the left side of the head to see how that would affect their ability to say words in English or in Spanish. Although there were a few people who were quite affected by the stimulation, in fact, one participant had quite a bit of trouble saying words in English after stimulation to the left, we haven't seen a large effect at the group level quite yet. So overall, this tells us that the hypothesis that the right hemisphere purely serves in a compensatory role is probably an oversimplification. And even though some of these magnetic stimulation treatments seem to work, they may not be working for the reasons that we expect. But hopefully my research will put us on the right track to developing new and better understood treatments for aphasia that can convince the aphasic brain to release those hostage words. Thank you.